This time, my presentation will be focusing more on the actual outcomes of the PhD project, which I conducted within the profile project. It ended with a PhD thesis, which was titled Towards Sustainable Product Development Through a Lens of Requirements. And here's the team again, in case you have not noticed, we're a team of at least 7 different researchers. I'll skip that. This thesis focused on one main research question with 2 sub-research questions that helped focus the studies within the thesis. And all the results that were discussed in the thesis were presented in 7 different papers. I explored in which ways decision-making practices for requirements development and management can support sustainable product development. And within that, what current practices look like for requirements development, for sustainable product development, and then how those practices can be guided from a systems and value perspective. And it is all based in this understanding of that now the cheap has become expensive. And how does that relate to product development? Well, the product innovation process has a huge impact, as we all know today, on which sustainability impacts the product will have throughout its life cycle. And this product innovation process is where the product development process also takes place. And it has several steps where requirements development also goes in parallel. And requirements are important because they steer these different steps in the product development process. They provide the frame which the designers are using when they develop concepts and test those, basically. So there is an iterative process of how these requirements are continuously refined throughout the product development. This means that developing and managing product requirements requires that decisions are being taken about what the needs and expectations are on a product and how it should work throughout its life cycle. And those expectations come from both legislation, customer values, company values, the society, and from industry standards, from various sources. And then product development actors, designers, and decision makers, they need to agree upon which of these needs are most important, and how can requirements help steer that the design that they are developing actually meet the requirements or these expectations, and then how can they be met? For that, we develop functional requirements, technical requirements, regulatory requirements, and also constraints. So there are different types of requirements we can use in order to meet the needs and expectations. And I said earlier that we have started to understand that these that there are we can no longer just produce products and use products in society as we have been able to since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The cheap has become expensive. So is sustainability the requirement specification then of the future? Ooh. We'd like to help companies integrate what we call strategic sustainability thinking in these early phases of requirements development and management. Because in a sustainable society in the future, we are acting, and we're also in that also using products that align with the boundaries of what we could call a sustainable ecological system and a sustainable social system. And that would be something we call a safe operating space for society in alignment with basic sustainability principles. Currently, we're on this trajectory where we can hit a tipping point and we can definitely no longer continue to develop our societies in a sustainable way. So these basic sustainability principles are here. You can see some, I won't go into detail. You can read the thesis if you want. But here you have 4 different sustainability principles, where 3 are for the ecological system and 5 are for the social system. And you can also see some examples of typical sustainability impact that a product can have throughout its life cycle. And what we know is that around, or at least 80% of these sustainability impacts that the product will have throughout its life cycle are determined during these early phases of product development. And that was when the initial requirements were already developed. So we see that there is a need to identify what we could, in a sloppy way, say the right sustainability criteria, and find ways to operationalize those through product requirements. And therefore, we conducted this research study with all these studies that I presented a bit earlier today, following a design research methodology approach. And having conducted all these studies where we first explored the knowledge gap, we went out to you, the companies in this profile project, for instance, and looked at how do you go about when you integrate sustainability into your product requirements. And then we developed some tools and methods that could help improve the situation. And then we tested and evaluated that. And we realized that to develop requirements that perhaps could act as recipes for sustainable product development companies need to consider a few things, and that we call key elements for managing sustainability integration into product requirements. First of all, companies need to consider what their policies say, how impactful those are. So the strength and scope, so to speak, of sustainability policies, how much they can steer product development. How you then implement sustainable product development support in your process. Do they help capture, for instance, the right sustainability criteria at this early stage in the product development process? And last but not least, something really important, all these decision makers that decide upon requirements at the early stages of product development, they need to have sufficient sustainability competency and skills so that they can see what value sustainability brings into a new product and argument for that. So some contributions from my thesis were, for instance, a workshop to identify leading sustainability criteria, these relevant sustainability criteria at the early stage of product development projects. We also explored methods to conduct value function modeling, where we combined strategic lifecycle assessment with value modeling. And then we also developed a collaborative sustainability systems analysis method, where decision makers come together and map how sustainability criteria relates to other more traditional product performance indicators and agree upon a common picture of what the sustainability aspects are really important to focus on. And then we also suggested a profile model for managing sustainability integration into product requirements so that companies can conduct self-assessment inside their organization and identify which activities should we consider in order to improve how we work with integrating sustainability into requirements. And then we also explored an approach to capture drivers and barriers to sustainable design and which value chain actors that are important to work with in order to realize sustainable product development. Because in the end, artifacts have consequences, not agency. So we need to consider that when we design the life cycle of our new products. That was it for me.